Imagine you are a search and rescue officer trekking through a dead zone in the deep woods of the Pacific Northwest, looking for a missing hiker who disappeared 48 hours ago. You're calling out his name, "Thomas, if you can hear me, shout back!" And suddenly, you hear his voice clear as a bell, responding from a thicket of ferns just 10 feet away, saying, "I'm right here, I'm hurt." You push through the brush to save him, but when you break into the clearing, you find a man standing there who looks exactly like Thomas. Same jacket, same hat, same face, except his eyes are nothing but hollow, black pits. And when he opens his mouth to speak, he doesn't use his lungs. He makes a mechanical clicking sound like a skipping record player before repeating your own name back to you in your own voice. If you are a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in storytelling format, then you have come to the right place. We post stories just like this one every single week. So if that is of interest to you, please find the like button's favorite professional SAR radio and submerge it in a bucket of thick black tar right before they head out on a critical midnight rescue mission. Before we get into the chilling details of today's story, tell me, where are you listening from and what time is it there? Today's story takes us to the Olympic Peninsula in Washington State, an area home to some of the most rugged, moss-covered terrain in North America. This is a place where the canopy is so thick that the forest floor is in a permanent state of twilight, and the fog can roll in so fast it swallows entire mountain ridges in seconds. Our main character is a man named Miller. Miller was a veteran search and rescue officer with over 15 years of experience. He was a man of cold logic, a man who had seen everything from grizzly attacks to hikers who had simply walked off cliffs in the dark. He didn't believe in the old legends or the whispers about things that haunt the high ridges. He believed in GPS coordinates, thermal imaging, and hard evidence. But in the spring of 2022, Miller encountered something that made him realize that the evidence can sometimes be the most terrifying thing of all. Miller was part of a 4-man team looking for a 24-year-old college student named David who had vanished while trail running. They were working in a sector known as the Blind Valley, a place where radio signals tend to drop and the silence feels heavier than usual. What we call an oppressive silence. It's the kind of quiet that feels like the world has ended and you're the only one left to witness the aftermath. Around 2 a.m., the team was moving through a dense stand of ancient cedars when they heard a voice. It was David's voice, coming from a ravine about 50 yards to their left. "Help down here, my leg is broken!" The team didn't hesitate. They scrambled down the slope, their headlamps slicing through the mist. Miller was the first to reach the bottom. He saw a figure sitting against a mossy log, wearing the exact neon yellow running vest David had been wearing when he went missing. Miller rushed over, shouting, "David, we've got you! Just stay still!" But as Miller got closer, his training took over, and he noticed something fundamentally wrong. The figure wasn't breathing. There was no misting of air in the freezing night, no rise and fall of the chest, and the figure was sitting perfectly still, not the stillness of an injured man, but the stillness of a statue. Miller stopped 10 feet away. "David?" The figure turned its head. It didn't turn like a human. It was a sharp, mechanical snap. As the beam of Miller's headlamp hit the face, Miller felt a wave of cold nausea wash over him. The face looked like a mask made of wet, gray parchment stretched too tight over a skull. The eyes were nothing but hollow, black pits of endless, starving hunger. And then, the creature opened its mouth. It didn't use its vocal cords. It made a wet, rhythmic clicking sound, and then it spoke in Miller's own voice, using the exact words Miller had said into his radio 10 minutes earlier. "Sector 4 is clear. Proceed to the ridge." Miller's team members burst into the clearing behind him, but Miller screamed at them to stop. "Back away! That's not him! That is not David!" The creature, this mimic or Wendigo, stood up. It didn't stand up like a person, it unfolded itself. It was easily 9 feet tall, its limbs snapping and clicking like breaking dry wood with every movement. Its skin was translucent, showing the skeletal ribs and pulsing red muscle beneath. It moved with a jerky, unnatural gait, covering the ground with an agility that defied every law of physics. As it moved, it began to cycle through the voices of everyone in the search party, screaming their names and their radio calls back at them in a chaotic, distorted choir. The SAR team didn't wait. They turned and ran. They didn't care about their gear or the missing hiker. They were in a race for their lives. They could hear the creature jumping through the canopy above them, snapping branches as thick as a man's leg. Every time one of the officers stumbled, the creature would let out a wet, guttural laugh that sounded like a serrated blade tearing through leather. They reached their vehicles at the trailhead, fumbling with the keys as the pale figure stood at the edge of the woods, watching them with a frozen, lipless grin. Miller officially resigned from the SAR team the next day. He told his superiors he was suffering from burnout, but the truth was he couldn't close his eyes without seeing those black pits of hunger. Search and rescue later returned to the Blind Valley with a larger force to find David. They found his neon yellow vest, but it wasn't on a body. It was neatly folded and placed in the center of a large, flat-topped granite boulder. Surrounding the vest was a perfect, intricate spiral made of thousands of human teeth, none of which belonged to David. When the authorities checked the GPS logs of Miller's team from that night, they found something that made them seal the file forever. The logs showed that while the team was running for their lives away from the ravine, a fifth signal identical to Miller's GPS signature had stayed behind in the valley. That signal stayed perfectly still for 3 hours before it slowly began to walk toward Miller's home address, moving at a constant, tireless pace of exactly 4 miles per hour. There is a theory on Reddit that the Wendigo, the mimic, doesn't just hunt for meat. It harvests the template of its prey. It studies your voice, your gait, and even your digital footprint until it can walk into your house and sit at your dinner table, and no one would ever know the difference. But the real bone-chilling question is this. Miller hasn't stepped foot in the woods since that night. But last night, his wife woke up to find Miller standing in the kitchen in the middle of the night, staring at the wall and making a faint, mechanical clicking sound. And when she asked him if he was okay, he turned to her and repeated her question back to her in David's voice. What just happened? Imagine you are waking up in your tent at 2 o'clock in the morning to the sound of something heavy dragging itself across the dry pine needles just inches from your head. You hold your breath, staring at the thin nylon wall of your tent, and you see a shadow cast by the dying embers of your campfire, a shadow of a hand with fingers that are nearly 2 feet long. You realize with a jolt of pure adrenaline that whatever is standing outside your tent is nearly 10 feet tall, and as you reach for your flashlight, the thing leans down and whispers your own name in a voice that sounds like a recording being played at half speed. If you are a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in storytelling format, then you have come to the right place. We post stories just like this one every single week. So if that is of interest to you, please find the like button's favorite portable camping stove and replace the fuel canister with a pressurized can of neon pink spray paint right before they head out for a weekend in the deep woods. Before we get into the chilling details of today's story, tell me, where are you listening from and what time is it there? Today's story takes us to the high country of the Sierra Nevada mountains in California, a place where the granite peaks are as sharp as razors and the forests are so old they seem to hold their breath as you pass through them. Our main character is a man named Derek. Derek was an ultralight backpacker, a guy who lived for the sufferfest of 20-mile days and sleeping under the stars. He was a veteran of the Pacific Crest Trail and felt more at home in the wilderness than in his own apartment. He was a man of cold logic, a man who believed every sound in the woods had a biological explanation until one night in the summer of 2020 when the forest decided to break him. Derek had hiked deep into a dead zone near the Ansel Adams Wilderness, a place where the GPS signals tend to drop and the silence feels heavier than usual. He found a perfect, secluded spot near a high alpine lake and set up his minimal camp. As the sun dipped below the peaks, painting the sky in a bruised purple, Derek noticed something strange. The forest didn't just get quiet. It fell into what we call an oppressive silence. No crickets, no rustling leaves, no owls. It was a suffocating quiet that made his ears ring with a deafening pressure. He was sitting by his small stove when he looked across the clearing toward the tree line. There, standing just at the edge of the light, was a figure. It was impossibly tall, easily 9 or 10 feet, and so pale it looked like a streak of bone against the dark pines. Derek froze. His mind tried to categorize it. A tree stump? A trick of the light? But then, The figure shifted. It moved with a jerky, unnatural gait, its limbs snapping and clicking like breaking dry wood with every movement. Derek's heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. He reached for his headlamp and clicked it to the highest setting. The beam sliced through the dark, hitting the figure directly. Derek felt a wave of cold nausea wash over him. It was a creature that looked like a man who had been stretched on a rack until his skin turned translucent. Its ribs were pushing through its chest, and its face was a nightmare of tight gray skin pulled over a skeletal jaw. It had no lips, just a frozen, jagged grin, and eyes that were nothing but hollow, black pits of endless, starving hunger. The creature didn't run. It just stood there, swaying slightly, like a branch in the wind. And then, it spoke. But it didn't use its own voice. It used Derek's voice. It whispered, "I think I saw something over there," using the exact words Derek had muttered to himself only 10 minutes earlier. Derek realized with a jolt of terror that this thing, this Wendigo, had been recording him from the shadows, harvesting his voice to use as bait. Derek retreated into his tent, zipping the door with trembling hands. He sat there in the dark, clutching his bear spray, listening as the creature began to circle the campsite. It was a rhythmic, dragging sound times step, click, drag. Step, click, drag, asterisk. Every few minutes, the thing would lean in close to the tent fabric, and Derek could hear its ragged, wet breathing, a sound like slush being stirred in a bucket. Then, the creature would whisper in his sister's voice, then his mother's, and finally, it began to scream in a high-pitched, metallic distortion that sounded like a choir of people dying at once. Derek didn't wait for the sun. He burst out of his tent and ran. He didn't grab his pack. He didn't grab his boots. He ran in his camp shoes, feeling the creature jumping through the canopy above him, moving with an agility that defied every law of physics. Every time Derek stumbled, he heard a wet, guttural laugh that sounded like a serrated blade tearing through leather. He finally reached the trailhead at dawn, his feet bleeding and his mind shattered. And he drove until he was 100 miles away. Search and rescue later went back to his campsite after Derek reported a bear encounter. They found his tent completely intact, but the interior was covered in a thick, translucent slime that smelled like copper and old earth. What they found outside, however, was worse. They found a circle of Derek's own gear, his stove, his water filter, his map, arranged in a perfect, intricate spiral around the tent. In the center of the spiral was Derek's cell phone. When the authorities checked the phone, they found a video recorded at 3:15 a.m. It was a 3-minute clip of Derek sleeping inside the tent, filmed from a perspective times inside, times the tent, held by a long, pale hand with skeletal fingers. The audio on the video wasn't Derek snoring. It was a voice that sounded exactly like the lead ranger whispering, "He looks so much like me. I think I'll keep him." There is a theory on Reddit that the Wendigo, the thing that stands at the edge of the camp, doesn't just want to kill you, it wants to replace you. It marks its prey and studies them until it can walk out of the woods in their skin. But the real bone-chilling question is this. Derek moved to a different state and hasn't stepped foot in the mountains in years. But last night, he got a text from his own number. It was a photo of him sitting in his living room, taken from the dark window behind him, with a caption that said, "The spiral is finished. Are you ready to come home?"